This is an iPhone 11 Pro Max, and this is an iPhone 8 Plus. And today, we're going to be comparing the cameras. Here are the camera specs for the front and rear cameras on the iPhone 11 Pro Max. All the photos and videos you're about to see of this phone are going to be on the right-hand side of the screen. And here are the specs of the iPhone 8 Plus's cameras. These photos and videos are going to be on the left-hand side of the screen. This first image is of this scooter here, and the first thing that you'll probably notice right off the bat is that the iPhone 11 has a little bit more detail in the clouds. The iPhone 8 looks a little bit softer here. Also, a thing to note is the iPhone 11 Pro is able to get more of the image in the frame due to that smaller millimeter. The iPhone 8 is going to look more zoomed in all these photos. Moving on to the next photo here. These ones look pretty similar. The grass in the background looks a little lighter in the 11. I would say that the 11's color science looks a little bit better in this image. Here's a wide shot with the wide lens, and it looks like the tree on the 11 is a little bit darker than the 8. The 8's tree looks a little bit more detailed there. You can see it better. Also, it looks like it's a little bit clearer over here in the background. The 11 looks a little blurry, whereas the 8 looks a little clearer in the background there. Moving out. Here's a telephoto of that same shot. These two are pretty similar. The 11's color science I like a little bit more natural greens there. But these two look pretty close. Okay. Again, here the sky on the 11 looks a little bit blown out and maybe a little bit overexposed, but you can tell that it has a little bit more color in there. Whereas the 8, it does have a good color, but it just looks a little softer, a little bit more distorted than the 11's. Maybe with a little editing, this sky would appear way better. Moving on to the next one. So here's a little video of both of them. I'll try to play them at the same time. Okay. Both look about the same. Alright, moving on to this picture. These two are about the same. I'd say the biggest difference is here in the clouds. The clouds look a little bit sharper on the 11, whereas they look a little bit softer on the 8, as we saw before. Going into the telephoto of this picture. Pretty similar. The 11's colors look a little bit better, I'd say. Purple looks a little bit more purple. The contrast here from the deep black to the faded black looks a little cleaner and less noisy than on the 8 a little bit, but they're pretty close. Moving on to the next one is a video. So in this video is just a shot of panning around this sign here. This is a demonstration of the optical image stabilization, I'd say, mostly because on the 8 it's a little bit more shaky than on the 11. I'll play that one more time. You see there's a little bit more shake on the 8. And the 11's colors look a little bit better there on that building. This looks a little bright compared to the 11. Moving on. Okay, again, this picture looks pretty similar. This is with the wide lens. I'd say the sky is the biggest difference here. Maybe a little bit less of reflections on the windows here on the 11, which I like. Moving on to the telephoto version of this. A little bit greener trees in the 11. This pole is a little bit more defined and green looking than this one. This one kind of looks a little faded. Moving on. Here's a video shot in the wide. I'll start the 11 first this time. both pretty good. These are both using the optical image stabilization. The 11's optical image stabilization looks a little better. Let's go ahead and see the telephoto video of this. So as you can see, the 8 on this side is a lot more shaky than the 11. The 11 just looks very smooth, and that's due to that optical image stabilization on the telephoto lens. Moving on to a telephoto of a yoga sign here. These both look pretty good. I'd say the biggest difference here is in the 11 you can see a lot more detail on that stucco right there, whereas here it looks a little bit softer. You can't really see the detail up in the top left corner there, but here you can, on the 11 you can see a lot of detail. Moving on. This is kind of a test of the bokeh. The bokeh on the 8 looks really blurry, but not in a very artistic way. The 11's bokeh looks a lot more artistic, I'd say. Like, you can clearly see that this is a car. The lights are very proportionate, whereas here the lights are really blown out on the 8. And yeah, you can see more definition in the sign. This yellow sign here is the 8 just kind of looks like a blur. As far as the frontal picture, the 8 looks very clear and nice. I like the colors. And on the 11, I'd say the same thing. It looks very clear and nice, and I like the colors. Looking at the telephoto version of this, the 8 looks a little overexposed. 11 looks a little nicer. And same thing with the bokeh. The bokeh on the 8 looks kind of grainy, whereas the 11's bokeh looks much nicer, I'd say. That light in the background is a little bit more defined in the 11, whereas in the 8 it's kind of big and glowy. Moving on, it's a picture of a wall here. And this is very close. These images look very good. Maybe the 8 looks a little better. Moving on to the telephoto version. And here you can see that on the 8, this white looks a little bluer, whereas on the 11 it looks a little whiter. Both very good pictures. Next is this statue here. Very close, very close. I'd say you can kind of make out more details on the face on the 11, but that's really due to the color science. A little bit more detail on the cracks here on the brick, as with the 11. I mean, the 8 looks a little softer here. Same with that brick in the background too. More defined on the 11, softer on the 8. Here is a selfie picture. So this is the 8's 7 megapixel camera, and here the 11 has 12 megapixels. So you can see that my face looks a little more washed out on the 8. Looks a little bit more natural on the 11. This is around evening, so it's getting a little darker. I think the 11 handles the high dynamic range a little better at this time of day than the 8. Moving on. Here's a wide photo. And these look very similar. The 11 is a little bit warmer color tone, but they both look very similar. Very sharp pictures. Here's the first night mode shot. So here the 8, this is just straight out of the wide, and the 11, this is straight out of the wide with night mode enabled. You can see that the grass is much more vibrant, much more defined. It almost looks a little bit fake, but yeah, you can see that this is a lot brighter. The sky looks so much more clear on the 11. The 8 is very grainy, and you can't really see that much detail. Moving on is a telephoto of the same thing. Again, sky very grainy, very dark, whereas on the 11 it's very blue. Looks very nice. Okay, here we have a couple lights in the background. The 11 gives off these light shafts, and I think that's just because the lens at the time was dirty. I tried to wipe them off as best I could. The 11 is a lot brighter on the left side of the tree as opposed to the 8. The 11's colors seem to be more vibrant than the 8 as well. Moving on, it's a telephoto version of that. Again, light shafts over here. The 8's lights are very big and puffy. I'm not sure I like that. I like this more on the 11. The bush is a little bit clearer in the background on the 11 than it is the 8. Okay, these are very similar images, both shot in low light, although the lights back here are really helping the 8 out. That's why it looks very bright. I'd say that as far as the bricks go, very, very similar images. The big difference here is the lights are more defined. You can see there's clearly 2 lights here and 2 lights here, whereas on the 8, the lights merge together and they're not as well defined. I think that's just because the 11 has a much bigger advantage in night mode, and it can pick out details really sharp in night mode, whereas the 8 is struggling. Next up is telephoto version of this. Very similar pictures in terms of quality. Not much difference there except the warmer colors on the 11. Okay, and here's the first night mode video. Of course, there is no night mode on video. This is just straight out of the lenses. But even though there's no night mode, you can see that the 11 handles nighttime much better than the 11. Moving on. This is a portrait picture at nighttime using wide angle lenses on both. Here's the telephoto version of them. Much greener greens on the 11. Here is portrait shots of those same images. This is the wide angle, and then this is the telephoto. And then here we have videos straight out of the wide lenses. Much more greens on the 11. Both very good optical image stabilization. Okay, here's a nighttime shot of a tower, and it's kind of hard to spot the difference in these. These both look very, very good and very sharp. However, the 11 has some subtle differences here in the lights. You can see the light is a little bit more defined, looks a little bit brighter. And then the lights up here, these are all very clearly defined, whereas again, the 8 suffers from those lights being overexposed a little bit, so it makes them look a little bigger, where here the green lights are a little smaller, these are a little bigger. Very, very subtle differences in these pictures. Next is another nighttime shot. Very dark up in here on the 8, or it's lighter on the 11. And here you can clearly see that night mode is happening because it's holding that shutter open and these trees were blowing, so these are blurry. But the main focus here is look how dark that background is in the 8, and then it's much brighter in the 11. You can clearly make out much more detail in this tree back here on the 11 than you can the 8. And then here are telephoto versions of the 2. And here is videos of the 2. Again, this is in very low light. The 11, much brighter. It's able to suck in that light. Here is a selfie shot at night. Not bad on both. The 8 holds up surprisingly well with that 7 megapixel camera. Although it cannot compete with the 11. The 11 looks way sharper. It's much more clarity in the face. The face is kind of blurry here. Much more detail in the flowers. And then here is an attempted wide angle version of the 2. The 8 doesn't have a wide angle on the front. The 11 does. And then here's 2 selfie pictures on very, very dark backgrounds, and there's a very big difference here. The 11 blows the 8 out of the water in this picture. I think this is the biggest difference in any of the pictures that we've seen so far, in that look how much that front-facing camera is able to capture, whereas on the 8 with that black background just falls apart. This is a much better image on the right. Moving on. Here are 2 night videos. just a simple waterfall. It's shot in the wide lenses on both of them. The 11 is a little brighter. This is probably the darkest video shot on these two cameras. Next up we have slow-mo video. So this is the 8 slow-mo on the left and the 11 slow-mo on the right. Not too much difference here. The 11 is maybe a tad brighter. The 11 flickers a lot, whereas the 8 does not flicker that much. Moving on. So these two videos are both shot in 60 frames per second. And this is just straight out of the camera lens. You can see the 11 is, again, brighter, warmer color tones, whereas the 8 cooler and darker because it can't suck in that light that the 11 can. Okay, wide shot. Very similar images again. The lights are much more detailed on the 11 than they are the 8. And here are telephoto versions of the two. Again, even with the telephoto, the lights are much more defined on the 11 than they are the 8. And that's the end of our reel. So those are the comparisons of the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 11 Pro Max. I want to hear what you guys think, so leave your comments in the comment section of this video. And if you like the video, hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.